Hi, welcome to this video. My name's Hannah and I've just spent, like 2 months ago I came back, but I've just spent 2 years at Pearson College UWC. So it's a UWC college and I did IB for the past 2 years and that's been a lot. And that's something I want to talk about today because it's been an experience. And I think that something like that deserves reflecting upon on. So that's just what I want to do right now. I don't know. Like, UWC completely changed my life. I'm not gonna not gonna lie about that. And it sounds like a cliche, but because it's a place where I've spent my time from the age of 16 to the age of 18, and it's a totally different setting than, living at home with my family, going to school where I went before. It shaped me. I'm in the age of being shaped by these experiences. And it's, you just discover who you are, you discover who your friends are, and all that fun stuff. So that's... And it's been great, but it's also not been great. I don't want to talk about why it's been great or not great. I just want to talk about what I think of UWC and IB, because, like it or not, IB is a big part of being at UWC, and what I think that could be better done. And I brought notes because it's a lot. Overall, I think for anybody who has been at UWC, it really depends on us what we do there. You have to, it's a place to learn how to balance your social life, your schoolwork, your well-being, everything like that. But in proportions that you probably encounter for the first time in your life, because you have to balance your school, but in your senior year of high school or junior senior year of high school, and on the grades it really depends what college you will go to. But on the other hand, the connections you make and the friendships you make at UWC are incredible, and not only could be potentially useful for the future, but are absolutely incredible. The friendships are great, and you want to put your time into that, but you also have to put your time into schoolwork, which isn't always easy, and to do both well, you should think of your well-being, but it's hard if, I don't know, you're just a bit introverted and you always live with 3 or 4 other people, you're never alone, and you don't know how to take care of yourself. Anyways, I think that UWC is definitely worth it, 100%, but it's not the only way, it's not the only school, it's not the, right path, it's on everything, because as any other place, it has tons and tons of its own mistakes and faults, and Pearson obviously has. I love that school, but it has a lot of mistakes, it has a lot of problems, and just like everything. So it's not as perfect as UWC usually is pictured. Absolutely not. One of the things UWC is always praised for is intercultural learning, and while that seems to be true, and while that is true, and it's a crucial part of what UWC is, it sometimes is done in a not the best way. UWC, in my opinion, and I think in opinion of many others, UWC fails to challenge the status quo a bit. Everybody who's been part of UWC, failed to challenge the status quo, which brings problems, because then it's on the minorities to educate the majority about anything. And I think that could be really changed with just more structural approach to intercultural learning. I mean, more challenging of status quo, which obviously is hard at place like UWC, where you're just for 2 years, and the whole time, or most of the time, it feels just like as in transitioning place. And it is, it definitely absolutely is. But at places like this, it's really hard to make a change, because not enough people stay there long enough to make a change. And that applies to faculty and staff too. Yeah. Also, for Pearson specifically, being on indigenous land, more specifically, being on the Shawnee First Nation people's land, and I mean, acknowledging it only now, maybe a few years earlier, but like trying to connect with the people on like some meaningful partnership, meaningful cooperation. That's happening mainly year after me, like in our years. Obviously that's great. It also means that UWC follows the tone of reconciliation that's been already set by people who actually took action before, and UWC is just catching up, which I don't think it's supposed to be like that, but and that's just one example of many things. I mean, for example, another thing is the English language. When there's not enough support for English language learning, and not enough support of understanding how language shapes the way we think and the way we express ourselves, and how not knowing the common language can be for an individual, especially for an individual who is like 16, 17 years old, be very problematic in a place that it's not that considerate of it. And that UWC is. UWC is really not considerate of it, because although there is some support for learning English, English is still thought of as the standard language, as the language that should be, you should know. And it's hard for people to acknowledge sometimes that not knowing English doesn't, like, it's not a minus, it's not a mistake for the person, because they probably know many other languages usually. It just brings up all the topics about privileges, and in not the best way, because it's not that addressed at UWC, and students learn to only address it in their second year, at the end of their when they gain the confidence to speak up against the school, or for what they believe in. But because again, that's the problem with UWC. I think we expect it to be a place that supports change and supports action, but that's hard when there's nobody consistently working on anything. Yeah. So those were some of the cons. That was some of the criticism I have for Pearson and for UWC. But I also want to say that I think it is a great place. It taught me so much about education, and about myself mainly. A lot about myself. I think at any place where you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you learn a lot about yourself, and UWC is definitely a place like that. But back to the education that it taught me about, that's mainly in the way of IB. it taught me to value the system I'm in, while I'm still very critical to it. And I think that's the approach I took to IB now, because compared to the school system I was in before, I enjoyed IB so much more. Yes, it was absolutely demanding of so much in my life, and I didn't always have the capacity to give to the schools and to my academics what would be required, because life, and IB is not considerate of that, which is quite a negative. But also, as it goes, I think it taught me how to think critically about my opinions, though in very narrow-minded point of view, but it just introduced me to this chapter, and from there it's on me to take it, to being more critical about my view and my point of view and other people's points of view, because IB teaches that, but only up to a certain limit, up to the limit it wants, and it teaches only a certain way of looking at things. And I think, even though at some points it's hard, if you do not recognize this way of looking at things as your own, but afterwards I think it's better, because it teaches you how to be critical about it and how to view it more critically, as you learn along. You have your approach to things, and then there is this IB approach to things, and you're like, oh wow, that's a different approach. And even though IB says, oh no, my approach is the right one, you can be like, nah, I have my opinion, I have my way of doing things, other people have their own way of doing things, and IB, this is your way of learning, this is your way of looking at things, this is your way of analyzing things. And while at some point you have to learn it in order to do well in IB, it teaches you that, this is a different approach, and that's good. The fact that the approach is narrow-minded is shitty, but that's what you will learn, and you will know it. So, in its own sense, IB supports open-mindedness, in my opinion. It just depends how you approach IB, which also depends how you approach learning, I would say. But having said that, I definitely think that in IB there's not that much space for individuality, but for me there's more space for it and for creativity than from the school system I come from. So coming to Pearson and starting to do the IB, obviously it was challenging, but at the same time I'm like, oh wow, I actually have some freedom. Learning more and realizing, no, I don't have that much freedom, I've been taken aback by that, but I think that's a good thing, because I've realized that, the IB that I wanted to do, the UWC I wanted to go into, it's not as perfect as I thought it is, and acknowledging that, but also being like, I met incredibly inspiring people at the UWC, like insanely inspiring people, people I would, to the end of my days have something to learn from. And I mean, I'm super grateful for that, and I think that's the biggest thing about UWC, is like making these connections and just going through things, just learning through things. And because UWC is a lot and it's overwhelming, you have to know how to deal with it, but you learn it because you have to throughout the time. And I think that's definitely worth later in life having, because you'll need it in the end. So yeah, I mean, I loved Pearson. Not all the time while I was there, but looking back, I love Pearson. and I love UWC, and I love the concept of it. It has many mistakes. I think it has many mistakes. IB has many mistakes. I think there should be more approaches to learning included. I think that there should be, you know, more freedom, more space for individuality. But that's for UWC to figure out, if UWC diploma is the way, which seems like it might be, or if, you know, for IB, alternating the IB to bring more of UWC even to other schools might be better, because I mean IB is taught all around the world and I think it has a great potential, but it's still very narrow-minded, and I think everybody who did IB at some point is like, yeah, I don't understand this, I don't see how this is valuable, I don't see why I have to do this in this approach or in this way, just because some concept, some educational system tells me to, because, you know, there are many approaches to things and some might be better than others. IB is not always right, but the truth is, no person, no system, no place is always right. So we just take from it what we can and move on. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I would summarize it, because in the end, that's what UWC was for me, that's what Pearson was for me. It taught me how to be myself, it taught me how to, it didn't teach me how to be myself, it pushed me to be myself. I don't know, I just really loved Pearson, loved UWC, even though it took a lot out of me. But you know, that's Pearson, that's UWC, that's the IB. So I think if you have any thoughts, just leave a comment, just let me know, I'd love to discuss it more. That's it, and thanks for watching.